Hi, I'm George Freestone, and I'm back for the 24th episode in our baseball journey, the story of my wife and I visiting each of the then current Major League ballparks. And the park that we visited for this episode is Target Field in Minneapolis. And the game that we saw is one, of course, with the Twins, my t-shirt, but also with the Padres. And the Padres probably wished they had not been there for this particular game. It was very lopsided, and you'll hear more about that shortly. But first, let me share my desktop and bring up the slide that we're going to talk from. I should probably, before we go any further, try and share with you a little bit more about my t-shirt. Yes, it is a Twins t-shirt, but in addition to being a Twins t-shirt, it's a named Tim Twins t-shirt. And the name on the back is notable. And here it is. Let me share this. Probably before a few of you were following baseball, but Hammering Harmon Killebrew, also known as the Killer, Hall of Fame player that he is, played largely his entire career for the Twins between 1954 and 1975. He finished up as a Kansas City Royal. And one of the notable things about Harmon is in all those years, he amassed 573 home runs. So that's what's on the back of my t-shirt. And with that, I'll switch back here to the slide and we'll begin talking about the game after I move me to a more pleasant spot so that I'm not covering up some of the pictures that are on this very crowded slide. For this particular trip, unlike many of the others where we get in the car and we do a little bit of a route to try and pick off a couple of different ballparks, we treated this trip to Minneapolis, Minnesota as a one-off, as the first bullet says. So in September of 2017, we flew to Minnesota, spent, I think, 3 days there, and then returned home. But it was a very busy 3 days. So this trip was a one-off. And we actually arrived in Minneapolis on September 11th. And as the second bullet says, over on the left, it was the first Monday night football game. And you can see that particular stadium, which is made out to look a little bit like a Viking ship. It's, I think, US Bank Field or whatever. But the first Monday Night Football game of 2017 found the New Orleans Saints losing to the Minnesota Vikings. And as I mentioned, it was the day of our arrival in Minneapolis. We stayed at a hotel very close to the football stadium. And so there was quite a collection of football fans there for that particular game. Now, the Twins, as a franchise, started life in Washington, D.C. as the Senators. You can see the Senators icon up here, and then the Twins right here. The C, of course, is for the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Um, the ballpark, Target Field, is actually in Minneapolis, but they became the Twins in 1961 after a 1901 to 1960 tenure in Washington, D.C. as the Senators. Many times I will enjoy a kielbasa at the beginning of the game in the ballpark. For this particular game, you can see me here with my Brooklyn Dodgers jersey proudly being displayed. We ate at the Butcher and the Boar prior to the game, and I had two kielbasas at that particular restaurant. So this was a heavy carnivore meal or series of days for us. You'll hear more about that as we proceed through a couple of the rest of these pictures. But prior to the game, I enjoyed my kielbasas there. Now, it was a night game at Target Field, and you can see several of the pictures from the game uh, there indeed. You can see the picture of the field, which is again my background in Zoom. That's from my wife Carol walking around the ballpark and taking some shots as she did that. She does that frequently to try and explore the nooks and crannies at the ballpark and to see what kinds of attractions they have. Also helps a lot putting together some of the pictures that we bring to you as well. But you can see from our seats, rather, this wasn't where we were sitting. That's where Carol was just walking. If you see in the upper left, right next to the Senators icon, you can see pregame announcers being shown in the telecast warm-up for the game. And I have a fair number of pictures here from the game, but in looking at this, I have virtually only the Twins there. I really don't have pictures here for the Padres as well. And why do we call the Padres sometimes the Friars? Well, because in Spanish, that's what Padre means. There was a lot of fireworks at this particular game. I mentioned it was lopsided. You can see the score and in this area where you can get to the box score if you just click on that white square. But the score was 16-0. There were a total of 22 hits, and the Padres only had 4. But this was a unique game for Carol and I to visit because a major league record was set. There was a home run for the Twins in each of the first 7 innings. They had an incredible number of total bases as a result of that, and there was no shortage of fireworks for each of the home runs that they indeed hit. So the game was a blowout. The Padres probably wish they hadn't been there for that particular game, but still, it was a delightful game. And you can see one of the vendors here. You can see Minnesota Wild, I think one of their mascots there as well. And it really is a beautiful ballpark. It replaced the Metrodome where they historically played, which was I think, a domed stadium. So they do get some cooler weather at the beginning and at the end of the season. Okay, now we're going to shift gears and talk about some of the other things that we visited while we were in Minneapolis. And I talked about our St. Louis visit fairly recently, where we visited a basilica as well. We visited the first basilica that was bestowed by a pope in America in Minneapolis. And as the 5th or 6th bullet over there says, name that basilica. Well, the answer is actually on the screen. It's the Basilica of St. Mary here in Minneapolis. It really is a beautiful facility. You can see from the outside what it looks like, and you can see this big circular stained glass window. Up here, you can see what that stained glass window looks from inside the facility looking out. And there's a couple of other images from inside the church included around this particular collage as well. Another noteworthy attraction in the same general area as the basilica is the sculpture garden. And that includes things like this blue rooster. It also includes the artist designed mini golf, and this happens to be just one of the holes from that particular mini golf collection of holes. But one of the more notable pieces is the spoon bridge and cherry that you see right here. And these are all within a visual sight of the basilica that I pointed out earlier. Just like all the rest of our slides, you can get to not only these pictures, but the pictures that didn't make the slide. We have many more from the game, for example, by just clicking on this particular link from the slides, of course, not from the YouTube recording. And the link for the slides is indicated in the description for the YouTube video that we're compiling here. Now, Minneapolis is another great city. And one of the things that made Minneapolis Minneapolis is flour. And you can see a very prominent gold medal flour here. There was no shortage of flour factories along the Mississippi River, which you can see right here. This actually is the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. And I believe these falls are the St. Anthony's Falls. And that's part of the reason why the flour industry grew up in this particular region. There was power that could be generated from those falls, and indeed that's what happened. Now, I ran out of space, so I started abbreviating different things here. I'm going to skip around some of these acronyms or whatever. We went to the Mill City Museum, which was a museum that told the story about flour in Minneapolis. And it was actually housed in one of the initial factories that indeed was there along the river in Minneapolis. We also went to the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and one of the notable things that I'll mention there that you don't see in every art museum is a very noteworthy car. This automobile is a 1948 Czech Tatra, Model 87, and it's rumored that this particular vehicle, or the series that they made, was instrumental in helping with the design of the VW Beetle, the Bug. So that's just one aspect of the splendors that you can find within the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Another museum that we attended in Minneapolis was this Hennepin History Museum, historical museum, and that was a delightful facility as well. But we can't fit necessarily all of the pictures from all of the places that we visited on this particular chart. I've talked to you about Chihuly glass several times, and I have another example of it right here. And that, I believe, we saw when we were at the MIA, the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Okay, the Guinness Book record chandelier is right here. This is an unusual chandelier, but we think it could be the world's longest. It is actually in the post office for the city of Minneapolis. I believe it's 365 feet long. It weighs 16 tons. And it's rumored that Joseph Stalin was annoyed that this had the record. And so it's rumored he took some steps to try and create a longer, more noteworthy chandelier. So anyway, we did have the chance to see the one here in Minneapolis. I think I've covered everything that was in that particular bullet, with the exception of the tribute to Bob Dylan. Now, Bob Dylan was born, I think, in Minnesota, and there is a very significant wall mural downtown that shows Bob as a younger and older man and has "The Times Are Changing" on it. It is a mural that I think only came into being in 2015. Another thing that we did, now again, we're going to date ourselves a little bit, but the Mary Tyler Moore comedy show, the half an hour show that was really a spinoff from the Dick Van Dyke show. Mary Tyler Moore and her friends were in Minneapolis and involved in a news program there. But it was a comedy show, and there is a statue that used to be outside, and we had to go on a mission to try and find that statue. We did, and inside that particular building, they also had a beret that you could throw, because in this statue, Mary Tyler Moore is tossing a beret. You can see a little bit of that there. And in our rendition of it, Carol is there tossing a beret that they had for photo ops as well. I mentioned that this was a visit for carnivores, and indeed, we concluded our last evening in Minneapolis with a visit to a Brazilian steakhouse, and you can see here the carving of that being done at the table. There are skywalks, which I forgot to mention. I think, yeah, they're in one of the bullets here. This is one of the skywalks that they have to try and protect folks from the elements during the winter, so you could cross the street and get from one building to the other without freezing. They have many of these skywalks above ground so that you can actually transit from building to building while it's still being in some comfort. The final thing that I'll comment on, I think, for this particular slide is when we were walking around town, Carol gave me the evil eye, and it's right here, and it relates to this final bullet. Now, come on, George. So, again, I urge you to either check out the box score or the additional photos from this game. We had a wonderful visit to Minneapolis, and we will be back soon with episode 25, which I think takes us down south to the two Florida teams and the new ballpark in Atlanta. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for your attention.